Washington, D.C. Our guest there is Paul Helmke, president of the Brady Center to Prevent Gun Violence. These latest figures that we've just gone through, the number of weapons that are being used, something like 90% of them from the United States. Your piece, your organization's piece, America's Weak Gun Laws Are Fueling the Violence in Mexico. How?
It's the folks in Mexico have figured out what criminals in the U.S. figured out a long time ago. Our weak and nearly non-existent laws in the U.S. are making it very easy for these guns to get to Mexico. Most Americans don't realize that we basically have very few laws on the book, almost none, restricting access to guns. And so it's very easy to go to unlicensed dealers who basically can sell any kind of gun without any kind of background check, particularly at gun shows, particularly in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. They go to licensed dealers who are corrupt, and because Congress, in effect, shields them by keeping the information about where the records are, what the inventory is, who's in trouble, and making sure that ATF doesn't have the funding. That's where guns come from. And the fact that we allow an unlimited number of guns, almost any kind of gun, very serious military, nearly military-style hardware, it's obvious. That's why 90 to 95% of the guns are coming from the U.S. We are the world's gun bazaar, and the gangs in Mexico have figured it out. If anything, Mexico ought to be putting up their army at our border to check the cars coming from the U.S. in to see who's bringing the guns in, because we make it so easy for dangerous people to get those guns.
Now, I think your article mentions that about 1% of all the licensed gun dealers represent 60% of the illegal gun sales. Why doesn't the government crack down on those particular licensed dealers that are involved in this trafficking?
Seems pretty obvious to me. Actually, that information's a little old. Congress no longer allows that kind of information to be made public. That's from 2000, when it was said that 60% of the guns traced to crime come from 1% of the dealers. But we only have enough ATF agents. It would take them 21 years to investigate every gun dealer, to stop by every gun dealer in the U.S. And in fact, we have laws on the books that say once you've investigated a gun dealer, a licensed gun dealer in the U.S., you cannot come back again for another 12 months unless you have a warrant. We make it harder to sell cigarettes to minors or liquor to minors than we do to sell guns in this country. And since you can go in again with a credit card and buy 1,000 AK-47s, 50 caliber sniper rifles that can shoot down helicopters, it's obvious why they come to the U.S. to get their guns. We do nothing to stop almost nothing to stop dangerous people from getting
I remember when President Bush first took office, and the statement of the NRA, we're now going to be operating out of the Oval Office.
Right.
Do you still see their power at that level today, and what do you feel needs to be done?
Clearly, we have a lot stronger supporters with President Obama, Vice President Biden, Attorney General Holder, Rahm Emanuel, others in the administration. Elected officials in Congress, however, are still scared to death of the NRA for some reason. They think that the NRA is powerful, even though the NRA basically hasn't won a single contested election in either the 06 cycle or the 08 cycle. We don't know of any person who's lost because of standing for common sense gun control over the last two elections, but a lot of politicians are afraid of them, even though when we poll people at exit polls, 75 to 85% of gun owners, McCain voters, Republicans, as well as the general American public, support things like doing background checks on all sales, strengthening ATF so we can stop this illegal trade in gun, restricting some of the weapons that are easily available to the general public.
And yet, even we covered, I think it was last week, that the passage of giving D.C. the right to have a voting member of Congress that was stuck into that bill, the elimination or the reduction of D.C.'s strong gun control laws.
Clearly sad. D.C.'s law was challenged. The Supreme Court spoke up last summer, said D.C. went too far, but the Supreme Court, Justice Scalia speaking, said you can still have restrictions on who gets guns, what types of guns, where you take guns, how they're sold, how they're marketed, how they're carried. But Congress thinks they know the Constitution better than the Supreme Court, and the Senate, sadly, the other week said that D.C. City Council didn't get it right, and so they want to play Super City Council in the sky and basically say you can't have a vote in Congress Congress unless we can gut your gun laws totally. That's ridiculous, and it does show the power of the gun lobby.
Paul Helmke, the case that just went on trial this week in Phoenix, Arizona, of a gun store owner who went on trial and charges he sold more than 700 weapons to straw buyers, knowing the firearms were bought on behalf of Mexican drug syndicates.
Right. Happens all the time. A straw buyer is someone who knows they can't pass a background check, so they get someone else, and basically the straw buyer says, let me look at that gun, how much does it cost, how does it feel, and then they have someone else with them fill out the paperwork. Obvious straw buyers, we don't do enough in this country to crack down on that, and it's because basically we are not serious. We want everybody to have a gun for any purpose. That gun dealer actually was originally in California, which has the best gun laws in this country, and he moved to Arizona because it was too hard for him to sell those guns in California, and he knew that in Arizona it'd be a lot easier for him to market these to the gangs and the drug cartels in Mexico.
Greg Randon is also